Be anywhere in Vegas right now, but they're here with
That
us.
felt like a high bar.
Yeah.
Felt like a very high bar. We've accomplished the first part where we walk out and we sit down with no incident.
Yes.
So we're off to a great start.
It feels like this is a success already,
Yeah,
Doug.
I feel strong.
Yeah, me too. So let's put on a good show for them while we have them for 30 minutes of attention. But it's nice to be up here with you. I was telling you when we were in the other room that this is my first time chatting with a real disruptive growth officer. I want to make sure I get that right. So maybe we can start off by having you talk a little bit about your role, how the role of CMO and Chief Disruptive Growth Officer work together, and what you're trying to achieve for General Mills.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I feel like the in general in our industry, the role of CMO has changed probably more than any other. I think about, we have a great CFO and he does a great job. And of course, he's doing things in a new and modern way, but fundamentally is doing the same job that someone was doing there 10 or 20 years ago. And so marketing is changing so quickly. So there's really two parts of my job: the sort of traditional chief brand officer role. And at General Mills, we're lucky we're a very strong brand-based company. So we have very strong brand builders. My job in that role is to help enable them to find growth by, having the right capabilities, improving the way that we do things. But then on the other side, I have disruptive growth. And that is where we're saying, you know what? Growth is happening everywhere. Mm-hmm. There's the growth that we're going to drive from our core. That's the most profitable and greatest growth, and we've been doing that for 150 years. But how might we go out and find that next thing that we're not going to stumble across through the normal course of doing business? Mm-hmm. So over there, I have teams with venture capital capability, and also teams who are forming literally 3-person co-founder startups trying to solve the problems that people are facing in food. So really, it's an understanding that we kind of have to do it all, right? You got to do the things that you're great at, and General Mills has been doing this big, building beautiful brands for 150 years, and we're also going to have to take a lot of bets and try a lot of new things too. So those things, I think, are complementing each other because we're learning in both spaces that we can apply to the other.
How much time are you spending in kind of the core growth area versus the more innovation-focused disruption?
It's varied. I think early on, I was spending a lot of time on disruptive growth, trying to decide what should we be looking into, what should we be going after, what are the forces coming at big-scaled food manufacturers that we need to think about. So we defined those 3 forces, and they're not surprising. Generally speaking, we said, listen, there's a fragmentation out there in the marketplace. Everybody wants the thing that is for me. There's a real issue with the upstream destabilization of our food supply. That's something that we need to care about as a manufacturer. And, so we set those spaces, and then we have a great team working against those areas. And I would say now I'm spending a lot more time on the core. Mm-hmm. The core obviously is, 98% of what we do. And the world doesn't seem to be evolving any slower. So we are always learning, growing, evolving on that side of things too.
It's pretty cool, right, that a brand as established as General Mills has this focus on disruption and innovation to make sure that you guys are staying current. But how hard is it to incubate an idea through the more disruptive path and bring that into kind of the core business?
It's hard. I mean, the short answer is growth is hard any way that you get after it. I listened to the John Deere CEO speak this morning, and I actually think there's a lot of parallels between the John Deere story and our story. He talked about they have a history of innovation, including when they disrupted the horse, which is not a technology a lot of people are talking about at CES. But our company was founded 150 years ago. The reason that we're in the Twin Cities is because the Mississippi River powered the giant stone mills that ground the flour. That was the technology, was water power. And we made a better flour 150 years ago. And we've had a lot of innovation throughout our history. I think CES is all about what are the problems that technology can solve for consumers. Think about our brand, Betty Crocker. She essentially, in the Great Depression, was getting 5,000 letters a day from real women who thought she was a real person. And the question was essentially, how can I feed my family on a budget? Can you help me? And so, we make food products, but we've always been very focused on what problem are we solving for consumers? And in order to stay up with that, you have to continuously innovate.
It's been fun talking to Doug and hearing the stories of General Mills. It's so rich with history. It's exciting. Okay, so speaking about big problems we need to solve, sustainability is a core theme of CES this year, and I know something that you're personally passionate about, and something that you guys are trying to work through at General Mills. So can you give us a little insight into what building a more sustainable business and world means to you and to General Mills?
Another thing that the John Deere CEO talked about was the importance of farming. And you think about General Mills, and really what we do is we take an agricultural commodity, wheat or oats or honey or whatever, we make it really tasty and convenient, put it in a box, and it winds up in your house. And I think a lot of people, it can be easy to disconnect the experience of eating that food from what it really means to have grown it. And so we have commitments. We have commitments to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 30%. We have commitments to make sure that all of our packaging is recyclable by design, because that's that last moment that people have with our brands. But the one that I think is differential for us is our commitment to regenerative agriculture. And it's one of those topics that's not quite in the consumer zeitgeist, but it's coming because it's so real. And the statistic is something like, if we don't change the way that we farm, we have about 60 years worth of crops left because the soil is eroding. Now, we don't farm at General Mills, but we buy a lot of stuff and can have a huge amount of impact. We buy more oats than anyone else in the world. So we've made a commitment to contribute 1 million acres to regeneratively farmed land. And I think, we got a big group here today, and actually the person who leads all of our sustainability commitments is here today, because I think today, if you're talking about climate tech, you're probably talking about ag tech, because agriculture is such an enormous contributor to climate issues. And so we have a place in that system. We're not the farmer, we are not the producer, but we can have a great influence on how these foods are produced. And we have to. And we have to do it in a way that respects the total ecosystem in which things are grown. The watershed, not just the drop of water that you put onto that plant. These are complex systems, and I think that team does an amazing job of using science-based targets and helping people to change the way that we farm. So I'm very proud of that work.
It's fascinating. And also, we're talking a lot about sustainability within the advertising ecosystem, but when you start to talk about clients and you widen that out to the scope that you guys touch in terms of farming and food production, and there's just so much we can be doing good together, right?
Yeah.
So it's pivoting a little bit to that topic, which is just kind of more purpose-driven marketing in general. Obviously, sustainability is one component of that, but what are your thoughts on purpose-driven marketing for brand building for General Mills in general?
Yeah, I think purpose is a word that we've talked a lot about as an industry for 10 years, and I think maybe the further you are away from it, you might think purpose and think about maybe a specific charity or something that a brand is getting behind, which is wonderful, but we believe that brands fundamentally have to have a reason to exist in the world. And that reason to exist must fundamentally deliver value to the consumers they serve. So as an example, Cheerios, probably one of our most famous brands. Cheerio has been working on solving the problem of heart health forever. And it's fully integrated into what the cereal means, how it's made. Oats actually do something for you. That's purpose as well. And I like the Cheerios example because it worked on the brand for 2 years. If you were to go blind taste test Cheerios versus some cereal oats from a unbranded competitor, it's actually a better product. But it has to be that and mean more. And for us, that's what purpose is all about. It's, yes, of course, delivering a product that is a little toastier and oatier and more delicious, and it has a consistent and delightful crisp, but it also is doing something for your family. And so that's really what we talk about.
And purpose-driven marketing is a little tricky because there has to be a depth to it and authenticity to it, and especially when we're talking about sustainability and greenwashing and all these things. So how do you manage that process?
Yeah, we talk a lot about a couple of things. Number one, purpose has to come with action, and likely the action has to come before the talking about it. And number two, there are no brands that really should be involved in every single conversation. And so we think about what is the conversation that this brand should be involved in, has a right to sit at the table in because of those actions that they have taken. And I also think just in terms of, greenwashing is an issue, I think broader speaking, the issue is trust. And the more that brand X, Y, or Z says something that turns out to be not true, it hurts all of us in building that trust and credibility, something that is, quite frankly, at a little bit of a deficit right now. And so we are very rigorous about ensuring that we can be certain that the thing that we are saying is true and is verifiable. I mentioned the science-based kind of targets and initiatives. It all starts from a place of really verifiable truth.
And I know you're fascinated and you study other companies and brands kind of outside of your specific CPG space. Who do you think is doing a really good job with this?
I think there's a lot of people doing a lot of good work. And, there's some times where there are brands that we've all respected and known, and then they still catch you off guard. For me, and I'm sure for a lot of people in this room, Patagonia is a brand that has always really stood by what they meant, and those actions have backed it up with things like, hey, send us back your jacket, don't buy a new one. That catches you off guard, don't buy this jacket. But then to go from that to the founder giving the public the company, and actually the company will be maintained in a public trust that will be benefiting the environment. That's obviously something that you can only do in a very few certain situations. It's not a public company, but what an amazing action to stand behind what they have always talked about as a brand.
The best in class, for sure. Okay, so pivoting a little bit, we want to save the world, definitely, but now we've entered another year of uncertainty, macroeconomic challenges, talks of a global recession. I know that we're all really interested and fascinated in how marketers are navigating all of that. So what does it mean for General Mills? What does it mean for the CPG category in general? And how are you guys going to be tackling it?
You come to CES and you see all these amazing innovations, and some of them will become real big products. Some of them will never be realized. Some of them will be outdated in 5 years. One of the things about working in CPG is that people got to eat. And essentially, if you're in a tech field, this will sound boring, but like food growth grows at the rate of mouth growth. If there are more people, then more food is sold. And at General Mills, what we will be doing, I think, as this recession comes in whatever form it comes, is really doubling down on the value that we offer consumers. People will be scrutinizing those budgets, but food at home is one of the first ways that people deal with a tough economic condition. They eat out less. We sell food at home. What we need to make sure is that we're doubling down on the value, but not only the value just in terms of, hey, box of cereal, that's actually X number of breakfasts. That's a good value monetarily, but also the value that we can bring in bringing the family together around a meal that makes everyone happy. So I think that's what we'll be focused on during this recession, whatever it looks like, soft landing, hard landing, either way, we will be focusing on what our brands probably have always been focused on.
So in terms of planning, media planning and buying and spending, this is more of an opportunity for you guys.
I think so. I think now is a time for us to continue to invest in our brands, because our brands are going to be very relevant in this environment, and people will be looking for solutions.
Yeah. Great. So there are recession-resilient categories out there, which is great.
The best one actually is alcohol, because you know that when times are bad, you drink.
You drink.
But when times are
good,
you drink. So I don't know, if you see anyone from ABI, it can't be that hard.
Yeah, spend some time with them.
Yeah. I'm sure it's really hard. I'm sure they're great. They're super smart. Yeah. I love that.
Right. Hard job.
Yeah.
Tough job. Okay, so data. We talked a little bit
Yes.
about this. And it kind of feels like a full-time job for
Yes.
a marketer or anyone in our industry right now to try to keep up with data policies and best-in-class practices and balancing privacy with the need for customization and driving outcomes. So how do you spend your days navigating this alongside your team?
Well, I would first of all say that it's probably the place that I have needed to do the most learning personally over the last year. Like the evolution of the data sphere and how you manage and import that data, then turn it into actionable insights. That is a lot to learn. But I will also say that not all data is created equal. And so for us, this is going to sound obvious, but people are out there just getting all the data they can. And I actually probably don't need to know if you like blue sweatshirts versus green sweatshirts. But if you're willing to tell me that someone in your family has a gluten allergy, or that on average your family loves chicken dinner type, like that's really valuable data. So I think what we're trying to do is design experiences where a consumer will want to share some of that relevant information because they know that they're going to get a valuable piece of information, a tip, a recipe, a suggestion back. And that's what we need to focus on, because you can click on a lot of boxes and all of a sudden you're getting a lot of information and it becomes overwhelming. Everyone's trying to get your data. What you really want is entering into a relationship where your data is valued by that partner and you're getting something in return.
So a focus on value exchange with the consumer.
Absolutely.
Can you give some specific examples?
Yeah, I'll give you one specific example is that, we actually have a huge catalog of recipes. We have Pillsbury.com, we have BettyCrocker.com. So something that's very new that we're just starting to iterate with, we call it Recipes Just For You. And it gives you a chance to say, hey, who's in the household? What kind of meals do you like? And then we need to use that information and make sure that we're giving them something they didn't know before that they take and use so that we can continue to build that relationship. I will also say that, we are not a retailer. We do not own that final point of transaction. So those partnerships are really important. And we've also partnered with, I've talked about it before, we're huge fans of Fetch Rewards. We talked about the fact that there's a recession coming. People are going to be looking to save money on their grocery bill, and they're going to be looking for it in a way that's convenient and fits into their lifestyle. So being a part of that ecosystem where there are a lot of brands involved and can build up the loyalty of consumers' purchases of our brands and our categories, that kind of thing makes a ton of sense too.
But generally speaking, there's not as strong of a desire for precision marketing for...
I think we're trying to do both,
Yeah.
honestly. And what we're trying not to do is to go all the way onto the one side or the other. So, the example I like to use is we of course have to build the purpose of our brands, but if we have a lot of full receipt basket data, and we know that you shop on Thursday afternoons, and we know that you always buy Cheerios, but sometimes you buy Yoplait, then it would be foolish of us not to use that information to suggest on Thursday morning, hey, maybe think about Yoplait today, and here's an incentive.
Right.
But it's got to be a mix of both.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense. And you mentioned the retailers.
Yes.
And the amazing data that they sit on
Yes.
that you guys don't necessarily have access to for your brands, which enter retail media networks.
Yes.
Which have definitely changed the game a bit in the industry overall. So maybe starting with, how are you guys leveraging retail media networks and kind of navigating the new walled gardens that have sprung up?
Yeah, I think the question I get asked sometimes is like, hey, is this an entirely new dynamic for, General Mills and Walmart or General Mills and Kroger? And just because we're all very close friends in here, I will say that Walmart was always a giant and important customer for us. So I don't think it has changed the dynamic, but I do think it has really challenged us internally in three ways. And that would be sort of the things we're working on, I would say, are transparency, complexity, and comparability. So these retail media networks have incredible capabilities, and they are all working towards making sure that we have as much transparency to that data as possible. And that is a journey, because it is a change from maybe where we have been. But the more we see about how our consumers interacting when they're intercepted with this message or this particular tactic, the more we're interested in engaging further in these networks. So I think transparency is going to benefit both parties. Complexity is an issue if everybody is creating their own walled garden. Yeah. Right? And I think our brand management teams have a lot going on. And if you jump in the Wayback Machine and you're like, I got a great commercial, I got a great coupon, and a great promotional plan, you're good to go. Well, now you can almost imagine a world where a team needs a complete and separate surround for each major retailer because this lives within this cloud and that's separate from this cloud. So I think that's something to watch out for. The comparability issue is the magical one next dollar, right? Your year's going well, you get that one next dollar, where do I put it? Do I have the right data and tools to analyze what the dollar here does for me versus the dollar over here? So long story short, I think there's amazing capabilities. I think it'll make us better at working with our customers and creating seamless journeys for our consumers, but it's also a lot of learning.
Are you shifting more budget toward investment in the retail media networks over the last couple of years?
I mean, we are really trying to work on following the most effective dollars. Mm-hmm. And, the closer you are to that conversion point, it's really important. One statistic, in food, in general, new items have about a 50 index online. Because you think about your own behavior, you go to the grocery store and you're like, wow, new cereal, fun. But you weren't planning for it. We're not intercepting you necessarily with that same efficiency online. So of course we need to invest in making sure people discover the right things, and those investments make a lot of sense. But we still need to be doing those big brand building, long-term investments as well. So kind of like everything else, it's a balance.
Right. And we chatted about this a little bit, but the retail media networks are shaking things up, not only in just what they provide in terms of data and measurement, but a little bit of like power dynamic shifting in between platforms. Mm-hmm. So I know that you guys are agnostic in your approach, but what is kind of your POV on how that has changed and how it looks?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I think we're happy to be where the money is more effective, and it's, in my opinion, generally more competition is great, but it is interesting as some of these networks scale to see. I think the interesting question is to sit down Meta and ask them that question versus me, because I'm just eating popcorn and seeing how it's going to play out. But there's a lot at stake. These are very big businesses. Yeah.
And what does success look like for you guys at the end of the year? How do you measure success?
I mean, aside from our financial metrics, success in how we market is, did we offer something of value? Did we create an experience that was seamless and make it easy for the consumer? And at the end of the day, were there more households in this brand than there were the year before? If we have more people coming in trying our products, we feel very confident that they're going to have a great experience. And then we're going to feel very confident that next year is going to look great as well. So that's a success, is being a little bit more important than an afternoon snack, and in fact being the Nature Valley brand that you have a connection on a little bit deeper level.
Love it. And we're at CES where we're talking about a lot of things in the future. So maybe you can give a few predictions on what's next for CPG, maybe some insights on what's next for General Mills.
Yeah, I mean, I think some people have asked, well, what are you guys here? What are you here for? And for us, we've always been very, very focused on understanding the lives of our consumers. And this show is a little bit of a preview of what the lives of our consumers might look like in different ways in the future. So very important for us to stay connected to that. I think, one of the things you see all over this show that people have written a lot about is the increased focus on tech that monitors, health tech. How are consumers going to be leveraging that technology, and how is that going to be changing the way they eat if it changes the way they eat? If they're getting a signal very, very soon after a meal, for example, that they did something, quote, right or wrong, that's going to be something very, very interesting for us. So I think that'll continue. And then the second thing I think is that we will find aliens, because there's 1 billion planets and 1 billion suns. And so they got to be out there, and you'll be like, this is scary, but my Cheerios have the same quality that they have always had.
Yes.
And I know that will be true.
Providing comfort
Yeah,
for
exactly.
the world.
It's terrifying. Our differences will seem small when our alien overlords show up. Yeah.
Maybe some in the audience right now. I don't know.
And we're like, fine, let's go to 13 justices. I don't care.
So good. So what's been the best part about CES so far?
I mean, there's an amazing energy
Other than
here.
the alien.
Yeah, amazing energy here. I'm a learner, and I just think exposing ourselves to the different ways that people are going to be living their lives is always phenomenal. And I would say we're lucky to have a big team here. I think you really come together as a team sometimes over travel. You have those in-between moments that are not an actual meeting. During the pandemic, everything was an actual meeting, and that was a bummer. And it's wonderful that we had the technology to enable that. It's wonderful that we were able to operate our businesses, but we're having some human moments here, and that's actually pretty important too.
It is nice to get the human touch back again. And
actually, no actual touch,
moments.
but
no touching.
Yeah.
Nobody touching.
Just chat. Yeah.
Just the spontaneity is beautiful.
Yeah.
As well. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. It was great chatting with you, and I hope you have a great rest of your CES.
I am definitely going to. Thank you. This was a ton of fun.
Yes, totally. Thanks. Thanks, everybody.